button. And let's get going in 3, 2, 1, go. Why don't you go for it?
All right, so we are here in Game 2 of the White Raw versus StarCraft Bomber show match for, is it $150 or $75 now? I'm not 100% sure what happened.
It's still $150 total, but it kind of got split between 2 show matches because of the issues that we had. We'll explain those a little bit later, but it's still $150 up for grabs. Either player could get all 150, or depending on what happens, it could get split between the 2 players.
All right, so this is Game 2. Bomber was able to take reasonably quick Game 1 with just some really good opportunistic attacks onto White Raw, kind of catching him with his hand in the cookie jar. And we'll have to see what White Raw's plan is here. Here on Testbug, the map is a little bit more open in a few areas, and Force Field's not quite going to be able to help him out as much on this map. A lot of the expansions are a little bit more out in the open, so he's going to have to be a little bit more careful this time. He's going to have a harder time trying to grab a reasonably easy third, but of course there's a lot more expansions on this map than there are on Dual Site, which is our Game 1 map, and he might be able to sneak another expansion in this time around, so we'll have to see what White Raw's plan is. I'm going to screw that up like a million times too.
That's I know, it's actually really tough when you're really in the casting and you got to get out White Raw really quickly. I wind up saying White Wah quite a bit.
Me too.
I sound like Elmer Fudd casting StarCraft 2. Up on the right hand corner we have White Wah. I'm hunting rabbits. But, you know, I'll try to minimize that as much as possible. And it was actually really interesting to see Bomber scouting the entire map for expansions. If you're familiar with the rest of the StarTale team, you'll see that Ace in particular is quite fond of hiding expansions everywhere. So that could be just a little bit of an influence from playing with some of his teammates back in the StarTale house. As, you know, there's only so many times that you can lose to a guy because he hit a Nexus off in the corner before you start really looking for it. And just because he's been so efficient at searching those out in the first game means that White Raw, seeing that, is going to probably have to be a little bit more careful about that kind of a strategy. White Raw is one of these guys that's really scary because he can do anything at any given time. But knowing that his opponent is aggressively scouting for expansions, it's one of the things he might want to sort of take off the playlist for now.
Yeah, so that Zelda did manage to get a hit on this SCV here. Bomber's going to have to be pretty careful with that from now on and make sure that Zelda doesn't actually land another one. There is going to be a Stalker on the way in just a second. So this SCV's time in the base of White Raw is definitely limited. Bomber's going to get that out of there right away. He's got 3 Marines back home right now, and he's going to be throwing down a factory right away. And throwing down a supply depot here at the ramp as well. I'm kind of curious to see if he's going to bunker this up and go for a really tech-oriented build here, as he does have both of his gas. So something like Banshees or a Blue Flame Hellion drop not out of the question at this point.
Yeah, it looks like it's probably going to be Banshees, but if he does build another supply depot here, then he can put a bunker, put these 4 Marines in there, and that's usually a pretty big tell with this 1-1-1 build that it will be Banshees. But like you said, a Blue Flame Hellion drop is not completely out of the question. He is going to fly that factory over. For once, the player is not going to prove me wrong. And, well, I mean, if he builds a tech lab on the factory, it could be a Raven, but he's not doing that. So, yeah, it's going to be a Banshee. I'm trying to give him opportunities to still prove me wrong, but he's being stubborn. He's being quite friendly like he usually is. And in White Raw's base, we see he's got 3 gates and a Robo. So most likely he's not looking to expand for a while, unless he's just getting a really quick observer, and then he's going to throw down an expansion anyway.
Yeah, and the thing with this 1-gate Robo build is it does allow him to react to Cloak Banshee builds. Things like that, the more tech-oriented builds quite well. It is a little bit vulnerable to things like the really aggressive 3 racks or even 5 racks pressure out of the Terran player. So you do have to rely a lot on your early scouting so that you don't get caught off guard by that. Luckily for him, right now, Bomber is not going to be doing that. This Cloak Banshee, or Banshee without Cloak, because Cloak is just about halfway done, is going to be making its way out on the map momentarily here, but White Raw's Observer should be able to catch this. I'll have to see if this observer actually catches the
Nope.
Banshee or not. It doesn't look like it will be able to, but he will see that there's an upgrade going on this tech lab, and he will probably be able to infer that there's cloaked Banshees on the way. Might turn this observer around right away. No, he's actually going to be making another observer back home. How many, he's got a few stalkers here, so he should be able to respond to this pretty easily. This observer is looking like it's going to make it out in time. His cloak just isn't quite done yet. He's already repositioned his stalkers and his sentry to react, and Bomber is paying attention to this Banshee just because he is that good, and he will be able to pull this back without actually taking any free shots, but White Raw will be able to defend this pretty much without taking any losses. Banshee is not even going to get a shot off before it turns around. One more shot, and it will go down. Nicely done there by Bomber to keep that alive, and White Raw's going to send out a stalker to try and intercept, but it is a ground against air fight here, or race, I should say. He's so close to it, too.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's going to quite make it in time, though, as the Banshee does just barely slip over that cliff, over above that random rock formation. So just a little bit too slow. Nice job by White Raw, though, seeing the cloak upgrading on the tech lab, not only making a second observer, but realizing, usually due to the timing that most players do cloak, there'd probably be a Banshee on the way in just a matter of moments. So he was able to catch that quite nicely. Interesting there by Bomber, he repaired it like 10 health and then backed off. Apparently wanted his minerals and gas for something else. And then, went back to repairing. So, he's got the one Banshee out on the field. He's got a Raven. There's a second Banshee somewhere. Where is it?
Just pop. It's right. It's over by his main army. I saw it fly over the first Banshee there.
I was afraid we weren't making sure we were missing anything because the green on that green tile set in the top left can be sometimes hard to miss. But now that he's got the Raven in the mix, he can drop a point defense drone. He's got quite a strong Marine tank army with those two Banshees. This is a really nice Banshee Raven timing to be hitting here. And he's attacking right as White Raw is looking to set up a Nexus. So White Raw's going to freak out, go, oh my god, warp in units. He starts another Colossus, drops all of his resources, and Bomber's going to set up the contain down here in the natural. He can throw down a point defense drone. There it goes. This first Colossus is doing quite a lot of damage before it is taken out by those two Banshees. Almost every single Marine burned horribly by the lasers. And he will be able to push this back with the remaining units he has there. Well defended there by White Raw, focusing down those Marines. Bomber probably could have split those a little bit faster, but he was working on other things, setting up his expansion back home, etc. So he does get pushed out of the natural, and White Raw gets his Nexus down.
And there's a command center on the way right now for Bomber. He doesn't have a lot of forces to defend this. He's going to have to be pretty careful. It looks like White Raw might be able to push in here and do a ton of damage. There's another Banshee out here. He will be able to cloak, but there's an observer in hot pursuit here. The auto turret not going to be able to focus down that observer, so this Banshee will have to fall back. In this expansion, there's a lot of jeopardy right now. Zealots are going to be able to close in, and this expansion will have to get canceled. Bomber does fall back to a defensive position. Observer accidentally flying up to the high ground where there's a Raven waiting. Now this Banshee will be able to, both of these Banshees will be able to get to work. Right, White Raw is going to try to do as much damage as he possibly can with this, and he is doing a ton of damage indeed. Siege tanks and Marines going down almost instantly. Now going to be focused firing down some of these add-ons that Zealot's going to be getting in on the SCV line, and a few more stalkers are going to show up to help things out. But the Banshees will be able to clean it looks like the Banshees should be able to clean everything up. SCVs are going to come off the line to pick off those stalkers so that these Banshees can keep Bomber in the game.
Yeah, so Bomber holding on there just by tooth and nail, clawing his way back here. This is one of the things that a lot of the Star Trail players said during the Invitational that they played Test Bug on. They said they really liked this map because it wasn't too big, but it was big enough that it allows you a chance to try and make a comeback. Even after you lose the first battle, it's not completely over. So Bomber being really tenacious here, getting his expansion up, building it up at the top of his ramp. He has 3 Banshees out in the field, and he knew that he killed at least one of the observers. If you check the units tab, there's only one more on the field for White Raw. Not entirely. It is flying around in his natural, though. So it is a good idea by Bomber to at least, poke around, see if he can do some economic damage, delay a little bit while he tries to make this comeback. And, 3 Banshees is good enough to scare away only a couple of stalkers. So even though there is an observer here, White Raw is forced to completely withdraw, pull all the probes. He is doing a good amount of damage, and he's showing a good example of how, with a map just about this size, you can try and make some comebacks.
Yeah, so these Banshees are going to continue bouncing around in between this natural expansion and the main base, and that will keep White Raw kind of in between the two of them. He's going to have to be really careful, as any mistakes in his defense will allow Bomber to really start cutting in to those probes. And Cannon is going to go down here at the natural expansion to make sure that even in the event that White Raw's observer is out of position, or if it gets picked off, he will have some detection here. Cannon not really in range of pretty much anything here, so won't be able to do very much. Here comes a Raven as well to try and deal with that Raven, throwing down maybe an auto turret or something like that.
Yeah, he's almost got enough energy for a point defense drone, actually. There's only a couple of stalkers here. He could use the 3 Banshees and a point defense drone to actually pick off a good number of stalkers. White Raw did just warp in a sentry and 2 more stalkers, though, so if Bomber sees that, he'll probably back off. But he's going to try and continue to do damage. There goes the point defense drone, really well placed. It's just going to barely hit these cannon shots as they come towards the Banshees, and the stalkers themselves going to come in to try and help. Point defense drone getting low on energy, and Bomber does withdraw, still hasn't lost a star. Oh, there we go, there goes a Banshee, second one falling as well. Great job spotting with this observer to take down those 2 very low health Banshees. And Bomber almost got out of there in time, but did wind up taking 2 Banshees. And he still did a good amount of damage. If you look at the worker count, you can see that White Raw's only ahead by 8 Harvesters. He's behind in the income because of those mules. And the units tab shows a good number of tanks. There's 8 Marines. Medevacs are popping out on the field. A few Marauders as well. So their armies are looking closer and closer to even. So Bomber has done a pretty good job of pulling himself back up into this game with some nice Banshee usage.
Yeah, really stalling White Raw from actually being able to make it out of the base. White Raw now going to be breaking down the indestructible rocks that do block the Zelnaga tower of his base, and this will allow him to really lock down the space in front of his natural expansion and be able to deal with any incoming threats, especially considering that White Raw is also controlling the center Zelnaga tower. Observer's not really going to be able to do very much for White Raw at this point, because there is a Raven in the army composition of Bomber as well as Vikings, so he is being very adamant about keeping this observer back here in where his army is to deal with a potential Banshee threat when it does show up. Banshee right now are going to be swinging around the other side of the map, but he will fly through the vision of the center Zelnaga tower, and that will trigger White Raw to react. Will he make it there in time? Will Bomber turn this around? Oh, he will cloak. He's going to fly over all these stalkers. Manages to turn that around, so it will be able to make its way into the main base of White Raw. And White Raw probably not too far off another warp cycle here. He's going to warp in a few stalkers as natural expansion. Might want to pull those back into his main base here, as this Banshee is going to be able to start picking off a few more probes. It does have to be careful not to get in range of that photon cannon.
Yeah, the fact that this main is actually mostly mined out, helping out White Raw a little bit. He did see the robotic spade just finishing up the range upgrade, so he's going to realize that these Colossus are quite strong. There's 4 of them on the field at the moment, with a 5th one on the way. So Bomber is going to have to continue to crank Vikings. He's got 6 on the field with 2 more on the way. So he's trying to set up pretty much the same unit composition he had last time. Did a really good job of controlling his bio while microing the Vikings around, trying to do as much damage to the Colossus as possible while taking the least amount of damage on his bio. But White Raw is pushing forward with his forces. If we check the army tab, you can see Bomber actually pulled ahead. The food is completely even. So this is going to depend completely on the micro. No force fields at all, no guardian shields. These Colossus trying to cut through the bio, but those stalkers are going down very quickly. White Raw losing a lot of units with not that many sentries to support that army. To be fair, Bomber took quite a few losses as well, but a lot of very expensive units falling down for White Raw, while Bomber mostly just lost Marauders and a couple of tanks, and his Viking count is still pretty healthy. So White Raw's going to have to be very careful about reproducing Colossus, as they will die very, very quickly.
Yeah, so these Colossus and the remainder of White Raw's army is going to be sitting in a defensive position here. There's a pylon next to the Zelnaga tower. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually power it. And here comes Bomber with a ton of SCVs coming off the line, as well as a pretty huge army. Vikings are going to be able to focus down the Colossus very quickly. Probes coming off the line in the natural expansion to try and keep White Raw in the game. Siege tanks are going to be able to do a ton of damage here. Marauders running up to the ramp. This Colossus is going to go down very quickly to those Vikings, and it looks like Bomber might be able to take this game, as he's going to be able to mow through this natural expansion very quickly. White Rock calls the GG once again. Wow, Bomber's up 2-0.
Yeah, Bomber, man. He looked like he was in so much trouble. He had so many units in his base. It was a situation where a lot of Terrans would have just straight up GG'd right there. He barely held off that attack by White Raw. He had to pull half his SCVs, and they were duking it out with Zealots. That Immortal was blasting away at all of his add-ons. He's just like, no, I have this. And he just used those Banshees very effectively. Got his expansion up, just delayed for as long as possible, and showed good results for his confidence. And now we'll be moving on to game number 2. Game number 3, excuse me. So give me a second to save the VODs, and then we'll be going to a commercial break again. Yes, that game was so epic, we're just going to watch it again. No, I'm kidding.